Welcome to another episode of the Career Keynotes podcast with Tincup and Gardiner, where William and Andrew chop it up with respected Silicon Valley talent acquisition and HR leaders to get the real story behind their career journeys, along with an insider's view of how companies engage with candidates. Let's face it, these days, finding the job, much less nailing down an interview, is not easy. This is a rare opportunity to learn firsthand what companies are looking for in a candidate and the best ways to engage with them. And now, here are William and Andrew.
Okay, well, hello everybody. We're back, although we're minus William. He seems to be hung up, but we can't hold up the show. So welcome, audience, back to the show. You know, producer Bev. I'm really excited about today's show, and so excited, in fact, that I'm going to proceed without William, although he may be here any moment. We'll see. And the reason why we're going to play through without William is because talent acquisition thought leaders are very busy people. I always joke around, hey, it's like, you know, having a cup of coffee with Bigfoot. Like you want to make the most of it. In fact, take a picture. So I'm very excited about today's guest. I've known him for a long time. He's a very capable talent acquisition professional in word and deed, and I'm honored to consider him a friend and a client. And so, without further ado, please meet today's guest, Kevin Francis.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I am looking forward to the conversation.
Good. Welcome to the show, Kevin. Now, listen, as you know, I tend to talk a lot, and I also talk effusively, and you don't. So rather than have me tell everybody how cute and fun and smart you are, would you just take a couple of minutes and get a high level, tell our audience who you are? 2 minutes on Kevin Francis, just at a high level.
Sure. Kevin Francis. I've been a talent acquisition leader for about 11, 12 years. Prior to that, 15 years in sales. And previous to that, I was in law enforcement, to include my time in the Marine Corps. And that's a little bit about me.
Okay, that was a very little bit. So gives me lots of opportunities. So Kevin, you know, we joke around on the show. No one says, "Oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be in recruiting." Like that just doesn't happen. So I could spend an hour on the law enforcement thing. That fascinates me, as does the Marine Corps, as you well know. But we'll get there. But how did you from sales to TA? How did that? I mean, there are a lot of parallels, but how did just give us a little more detail on the journey into TA and what that was like, and was it done with intention and purpose, or did you fall into it? What does that look like?
Well, you know, I don't think anybody wakes up and goes to school and says, "I'm going to be a talent acquisition leader." You know, we don't. It's just not something that I think most people think of, and I'm no exception. I was in sales, and early in my career, I was in service sales. Then I got into product, and then I got into consulting. And I was doing HR consulting, and I happened to join an exclusive executive search firm and was there. And I thought, you know, I need to get in front of talent acquisition leaders. And so I organized a group. We got together on a quarterly basis. And I soon realized that this was something I really enjoyed. And of course, being further along in my career, I thought, I want to do this. And so I pulled a few of the folks aside and said, look, can you kind of mentor me and teach me this? Because I'm learning a ton through this forum, but I needed other information. I needed to bounce ideas off people, somebody that could give me some sound direction. And the next, you know, I did that for about 6-7 years. And then one day, a friend of mine who was the head of HR, he asked me to come in and lead talent acquisition for his organization. I was, you know, I mean, I have no, how should I say, inflated opinions of myself, but I said that, thank you, that's flattering. But if I lead talent acquisition for your global organization, you will fail, thus I fail. So I said, with all due respect, I tell you what, I will find you your TA leader. And I gave the individual 4 names. He selected the one that I figured he'd select. I got a nice dinner out of it. And when that person joined, about 3 months later, they happened to bring me on board as a TA operations leader. So that's really how I got into TA. from sales.
Wow, what a great story, and authentic and humble, just as you are. Okay, so gosh, where to begin? Let's start with the transferable skills. As you know, I'm quite passionate about, as are you, about helping veterans transition from civilian jobs to the private sector. How has being a veteran um, helped you, and or not helped you? And if you could just, are there any, what are the transferable skills? And you can also dip in the law enforcement thing. I mean, for those, for audience who he's not going to tell you, so I better tell you. He is military police, and a darn good one. So, but talk to me about how you think that helped you. And I really admire your modesty, Kevin. So
Sure.
go.
I think one of the biggest things that the military teaches, and it's not a direct thing that you learn. You don't realize it until years after the fact. But the one thing that becomes very evident is the fact that you can do things you didn't think you could. Because when you're in the service, they push you to do things. You're like, well, I can't do that. And of course they're screaming and yelling at you and telling you got to do it, and you do it. And you're like, wow, I can do that. So you really get that foundational principle of I can achieve anything, if you will. Now, of course, you're in your core MOS and you're doing your job and your tasks, and then you get out. And I admit you're a little bit of a loss. That transition period is very difficult because you're with a very tight group of people, your unit, whatever MOS you have, and then you go into civilian life and you're completely lost because you don't have that network, you don't have that support. So you've got to kind of pick up your feet, pick yourself up and move forward. And it's really about, it's not to sound cliche, but almost a journey to figure out what you want to do. Now, maybe you were fortunate enough and you know exactly what you want to do and you follow that path forward. For me, it was law enforcement. I was a military police. I went in and joined the LA County Sheriff's Department. And then from there, when I got into sales, I thought, okay, and I stumbled into it like most of us do in our careers. We just kind of stumble along, especially when you're in your 20s and your 30s. And I got into sales. I liked it. I went to a number of different companies, figured out what I liked, and it was really a path. But the one thing that underscored everything that I did along the way was that need to service others. Feeling like I can help somebody achieve something that they thought they couldn't attain. I don't mean that on necessarily an individual level, and that's when it comes to individual coaching, it's really within the business framework. Because all of us, when you make that transition to corporate America, organizations bring us in to deliver essentially a service to the company. That's going to drive the revenue. It's going to cut costs. It's going to shorten process time, remove waste, whatever it is, whatever element you impact, right? So how could I help somebody achieve any of those objectives? And that's really the way that I looked at it.
Wow. Okay, so you fell into it, and you're one of the, I loved everything you said about whether it's just being humble and asking for help or mentoring, and also the willingness to mentor other people. I'm a big believer in that. As you know, you have to give it away if you want to keep it. So good for you. It's people like you, Kevin, and that's why I'm so keen on having you on the show. All right, so you're one of the few talent acquisition leaders that we've had on the show that still has all their hair. So and because it's a very hard job, and we both know that, it's all about the people, and hiring the people. And to your earlier comment, the companies need a lot of help. No one has it figured out, and everyone's trying, right? Everyone's building the plane while they're flying it, and COVID certainly hasn't helped in any way. And so there's a lot of challenges with being a TA leader. What are some of the things that you think, as you look back, because it is hard. I loved what you said. We have to stop and just say the things that you said about, hey, get confidence comes from, in the Marine Corps, you learn that, hey, there's things I can do that I didn't know I could do, or maybe that I didn't even want to do, but now that I did them, maybe I'll do. I mean, it's just, that's so powerful because we all have these self-limiting beliefs. So good for you, because I think that's a big one. And we'll get to that job seeker side of the house in a minute. But to stick with TA, It is very hard. So tell me about a time that in your TA journey that a problem you solved, something you figured out that you were like, oh no, like just your comment about the guy that wanted you to run the global thing. And you're like, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. They don't bring you in. You and I both know they don't bring Kevin Francis in because it's going great. They bring you in to, put out a fire or start a fire or some combination of the two. So that being said, can you tell me about a time when you had to face a very difficult talent acquisition problem to give someone an understanding of, what the kind of problems that you're solving, the impact that you're making, that you want to make, that you have made, that wasn't easy, and that you're very proud of?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a couple of things come to mind. One in particular, joint organization, and they had a tech stack in place that was, how should we say, broken. And they had these huge recruiting goals. And and you think about recruiting, it's a lot like supply chain. You've got the candidate, you've got to screen them, you got to bring them in, evaluate them, hire them, onboard them, and then develop them. Because if you don't invest in them, they're going to end up leaving. And you want to make sure we're investing in them so that each year they're getting better at their craft. And in order to do that effectively, we are given a budget and we have to understand where we invest our dollars to market our jobs, to give the recruiters the tools they need to be able to find the candidate so that we can evaluate them and then hire them. And I was charged with a task of rebuilding, bringing in a new applicant tracking system, bringing in a new career site, bringing in a new CRM. And this is really a failure story that has a successful end to it. And we were there was a time constraint. So we had to pull all this together. And one of the reasons that you have to do these things, one is to accelerate that process, eliminate process waste, and then also with the career site, be able to understand where our candidates are coming from, so we could intelligently invest in those channels that are going to give us the best return. And so these are some of the outcomes of the tech stack. Well, along the way, a few people had moved on to other opportunities in the market, and the implementation did not go well. And we had to fix it, as Andrew alluded to. While the plane was in flight, we were still changing things out to get it to work. And in doing so, there were some challenges along the way. We have a customer set. A customer is the candidate. A customer is the recruiter. A customer is the hiring manager, and the last customer is the business, right? And so how do we serve all those constituents to meet the needs of the organization? And so there was basically, feedback and static and friction coming from every one of those channels. So we had to course correct, getting that plan together, building it to that desired state. There were some valuable lessons learned in it that I was able to apply in the next round in which we were implementing these tools. And so it's really about, the foundational component is the communication. And when you are in that vulnerable space where you think maybe you're failing or you're not on track to meet the deadlines that are provided to you by your boss, by the organization, don't be afraid to ask for help. And this was one time where I didn't do that, or I wasn't as active as I should have been. And so there was a price to pay in the outcome. And so my comment to that, for anybody is, anytime you are doing something, if you are not going to meet the deadline, not meet the objective, the expectation, don't be afraid to speak up soon so that you can get the support, the help you need, because so many times people are there to help you. And we have to do is ask. But if they don't know you need the help, they're not going to offer it because they don't know.
Wow. Listen, okay, I've got 100 million more questions, but before I keep going, I'm going to, producer Bev, you're smiling like a possum eating dookie. So do you have a question for our esteemed guest?
Never cut me in with that segue again.
Okay.
Yeah, it's back a step or two, but you had spoken about the mindset to serve others, and you just made a whole list of this guy's your customer, and this one, and this one, and ultimately this one. So it's a long line of service. I'm finding that it's kind of a current mindset is a much more me-centric mindset. So do you have any tools or ideas on how to kind of reinvigorate the service mindset? Because I think that serves, it doesn't matter if you're selling pancakes or jobs, it just serves better when you are focused on a service aspect as opposed to what's in it for me. So I just wanted to hear your input on that.
Let me make sure I understand the question. Making sure that I'm right before I can serve others?
No. Making your head right so that you are serving others as opposed to, well, this guy asked me to do something, but there's no extra nickel in it, so forget him.
Right.
I'm finding a lot of young people or just some people seem to have a me-centric mindset. They're not looking at it as from a service perspective.
No,
That's a good question.
Yeah, so a part of it is an evolution, but having that mindset, to serve others, right? It doesn't matter if that's kind of your mantra, or your driving force. Whenever we have a task or a job to do, we need to understand very clearly who our stakeholders are and and it's really about understanding their point of view. What is it that they want from what you're delivering? Whether that's a product, whether it's a service, regardless of what that is, right? And putting yourself in their shoes, right? To say, what are they looking for? If you understand that, then you're going to be able to deliver. But if you don't understand that, there could be a mismatch. And without that understanding, you're never going to hit the mark. And so those are the things that I try and do, is put myself in their position, understand their point of view. And if I don't clearly understand it, I will ask questions around it.
But how do you convey that mindset into someone who doesn't have it?
How do you try to?
How would you guide someone into a different perspective of?
Right. So there's a number of tools you can use, but it's really about helping them understand. You mentioned, the me syndrome, right? If I'm looking at it from my perspective, you have to break it down to them and ask them the question. Do you want to be, what is their goal here? If their goal is to be successful, then you have to present it in a way that says, okay, to be successful with what it is you're trying to achieve, would they agree that A, B, and C have to happen? Well, if A, B, and C are going to happen, you need to understand what A is. You need to understand what B is. You understand what C is. And once you understand that, then you can deliver it.
So you just break it way, way down.
You break it down to the very simple.
Okay.
That was a good question, Producer Bev. And so, Kevin, I just want to iterate or acknowledge you, because you are a giver, a huge giver of self, and you do eat your own dog food, and you do, that's one of the things I've admired about you, from a distance and up close. And it's one of the things I think that's made you very successful is your, unfailing desire and ability to serve for the greater common good, whatever that means, whether it's the Marine Corps or the LA County Sheriff's Department or Motorola or whoever you're working for or with. You're the first one to step up. I remember we put that career fair on at the credit union a year or so ago, and you flew in and waved the flag. I mean, that's what you do. And I think it's a critical component to the success, to your point, Kevin, of any endeavor, is like, how may I serve? How may I serve? How can I help make this better? Even if it's, as you just pointed out, what is a baby step? What can I do to make this process, this system? And to your earlier point, and really the purpose of the show, thankfully, there's a lot of good work to be done within TA to make improvements. And so let's not pivot quite yet. So Kevin, obviously being a giver of self and serving is a critical attribute for a talent acquisition leader. What are some other qualities that you think are important characteristics or skills that a successful TA practitioner must have? I mean, I'm just going to throw out some really easy one: getting consensus, getting alignment. You mentioned singing from the same hymnal, organizing things, building morale. I mean, but what are some really key things that have served you well? And if you want, what are some things that don't work, that aren't going to work?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is critical in any talent acquisition function is you've got to understand who the customer is, right? You've got to be willing to work with others. And it's, as I like to say, look, when one and one comes together, it's three. And it's really the mindset you have to have, because if you think about it, if we look at the actual roles, a recruiter is basically like a cowboy out there. They're by themselves and they're reaching out to candidates, they're communicating, they're working with the hiring manager, they're working with the coordinator, they're working with their manager to deliver talent to the organization. And there's a way that they do that. And if they don't understand exactly what that hiring manager is looking for, if they're not partnering with them to understand that, right, then it's going to fall apart, because they're not going to be calibrated against the requirements of the position. If you are a coordinator, again, you're working with the recruiter, the same kind of thing. If I don't understand what the recruiter needs, if I understand what the candidate needs, or if I understand what the hiring manager needs, something's going to go awry. So the biggest thing is to understand others, right? And so that is a common theme for a talent acquisition leader. The other thing I think that is would be a fair comment, and this would be, they have to be able to, as I describe it, to look around corners, right? Look into the future, right? Think about, okay, here's a candidate here. How you have to think ahead and say, okay, how are they going to fit with the team? How are they adding value, right? And connect those dots. Because the reality is the person you're dealing with is going to have different views. So you've got to have some level of persuasion to say, here's why this person is a fit. Here's the value they bring to the organization. And that goes for anything in any one of those roles: a recruiter, a coordinator, you're in the operations side of it, you're in a TA leadership role. Those things are all going to apply. So those are some of the core, I think, characteristics and that are going to be needed in order to be successful in TA.
What a great answer. Have you considered anything in politics, like just a senator or maybe a mayor? I'm not kidding. You're so fair. And in the audience, if you're listening, it says, this is kind of why, this is who's on the other end. And I know there's this perception that, oh, no one's, how come no one's getting back to me? There's a Kevin Francis on the other end of this equation that's apparently pretty darn keen on doing it a good job and doing it right. And I'm not just saying that. I've experienced that in working with you and for you, Kevin. You bring that to bear. And again, there's a lot of good work to be done in TA. All right. Well, so we've covered a lot. I would also say, I think, again, I made the joke about you having all your hair. I do not envy. I've worked with enough talent acquisition leaders to know that it is not easy. It's to get that alignment, to get that consensus, to get, to your point, to really understand the challenge and educate everybody and get everybody aligned. And then by the time you do that, they move the goalposts. And then it's like, okay, we got to lather, rinse, and repeat. And I would add to your little, which you did a good job of answering, a thick skin. Again, they don't bring you in because it's going great. They bring you in because they're struggling. Maybe it's candidate experience, maybe it's applicant flow, maybe it's morale, maybe it's employer brand. It's always something. And I give you a lot of credit, because it's not an easy job. Okay, so now we're kind of at that inflection point where we're going to pivot. Producer Babib, is there anything else you want to ask Kevin before we? Okay.
Well, the one thing I would also add,
please.
Andrew, you touched on it, is the thick skin, having that resiliency, as I would describe it, because a lot of times you'll get into a search if you're the recruiter and the manager changes the specs on you. And the other thing too, no matter how well we do, it's never good enough.
It's never good enough.
So there's got to be that self-satisfaction of knowing that we gave our best and we delivered at a very high level.
That's not where I was going with the thick skin, but I think, thank you. That's why you're the guest and I'm asking the questions and you've got the answers. I was thinking, well, you've interviewed, I don't know, thousands and thousands. Producer Bev's interviewed a lot of people with her retail background. I'm going to turn this off. So I have a candidate really wants the job, and you know what I'm talking about. They, okay, Kevin, you know what? Just give me a desk and a phone and keep your hands and feet away from my mouth. I'm your man. You're going to love me. And you just know somehow or other, maybe it's not a culture fit or whatever. I'm not the right person. And you're actually doing me a favor, but not, I'm desperate. I'm like, no, Kevin, you got, and saying no to those people. That's why I could never do your job. And that's what I meant by that. And to your point, it is never enough. But having to, again, it's always someone's hair's on fire. And there's a point in the show, which we'll get to, where we ask for your, craziest HR story or recruiting story, whether it happened to you or you saw it happen to someone else. And, we kind of use it as clickbait to entice, because HR is just, wow, it's crazy. It is crazy. And it's like, sometimes it's crazy fun. Sometimes it's crazy busy. Sometimes it's just crazy. And so anyways, I think a thick skin is important. Okay. So we're going to pivot now. And now we're going to talk to, okay, Kevin. So maybe I just graduated from college. Maybe I'm new to the job market. Maybe I'm just having trouble getting traction as I'm trying to engage with candidates. What are some really practical, actionable things, comments, feedback, nuggets, guidance that you have for someone who really doesn't? You said something earlier in the show, I'm just going to touch on it. Like, you come out of the military and one thing they don't teach you is how to advocate for yourself or how to look for a job. And I always joke around saying, hey, being good at looking for jobs isn't something you want to be good at. And you and I have laughed about that a lot. But sometimes it's, hey, I really need a job. I need to support my family. I need to put food on the table. Like I need work. I need to earn an income. And I'm not having any success. So I've set it up for you. What are some things that come to mind to you as someone that has spent, the bulk of their professional career hiring people?
Well, I mean, there are a number of things that candidates can do, whether you're fresh out of the service, out of school, or you're 10, 15, 20 years into your career. Some of the basics are, look at the job description. What are some of the key points in there that you could potentially use to edit your resume so there's somewhat of a match? Because the one thing that a lot of folks don't realize is, you hear it all the time, God, the company never got back to me, right? Or I never heard from anybody. Then I got a note saying that they had filled the position, and it was very, disappointing. Well, the reality is, recruiters are getting inundated with applications, and so they're going through those applicants in a certain sequence, and they maybe just didn't get to yours before they found somebody to fill the job. So a couple of things you can do to be proactive. If you can figure out who the recruiter is, a lot of times it's on LinkedIn, it'll say which recruiter posted it. Contact them directly, right? Look for other relationships within the organization. I know for me, if I get pinged by a candidate, the first thing I do, I figure out who has the rec. I forward the note to the recruiter and say, look, take a look at this candidate and disposition them, but I want a personal note if we're not going to be interviewing them, right? So those are things that will get you a better, increase the opportunity to get a chance, as I describe it, to swing the bat, have that conversation, to be able to communicate why you're a good fit for a particular role. If you have a relationship you can leverage in the organization, number one, right? Number two, find out who's there and try and connect with them. because just applying and expecting something to happen is not a very good outcome. You're not going to get a lot of success that way. And then the other part of it too is once you're in that conversation, one of the things that you can do so that you can position your responses to what they're looking for at some point early in the conversation, because a lot of times the recruiter will say, here's an overview of what we're looking for, and they'll be very short about it. And then they want to get right into you, right? To figure out, are you going to be a match? Well, you don't really know what they're looking for. So if you can say, pardon me, can I just ask a question real quick? And one of the questions that could be very impactful is, what are the 2 or 3 most important things you're looking for from a candidate in this role? Or what would they be doing, spending most of their time doing? When you get that information, now when they ask you questions about the role, you're in a position to say, okay, instead of answering it this way, I'm going to answer it a different way with this different lens, because they've given me new information so I can make myself a better fit for that role. Or the other thing could be, hey, you know what? Based on what you're telling me, you self-select out. Hey, this isn't a role for me. And that's fine too. You don't waste anybody's time. But those are a couple of things that you can do so that, one, you get a chance to speak to somebody about the opportunity. And two, when you have that chance to speak, it's more focused and you have a better chance of advancing to the next step of the process.
You were like, this is like this couldn't be going any better. I mean, you're just, you're making it so commonsensical and logical. And I know that's not part of your charm. It's just part of your DNA. It's what makes you you. And I've watched you deliver on that a number of times. Okay, I'm going to throw you a curveball. And I just want to, audience, iterate a couple of things Kevin said that are very important. You miss 100% of the swings you don't take. So it is a numbers game, and you can't tiptoe around. If you think you're just going to send your resume in to this vat of other candidates and stand out somehow or other and not follow up, you're gonna, it's I often, one of the metaphors I use, Kevin, is if you mail it to me, I'll mail it back to you. If you FedEx it to me, I'll FedEx it back to you. If you hand deliver it to me, I mean, the easier you make it for me to connect with you or help you, the more likely it is I'm going to do it. And the thing that you're doing right now, which is so valuable, audience, is people want to help. It's not like they're sitting there, we do this thing of no. Like they want to find the right person. They want you to stand out. They want you to tell your story better, have your profile fit better, or have your LinkedIn thing be more compelling so that they can make better, more informed decisions. And it's not a game. And the easier you make it for them, the more likely it is to happen. So it's impossible to overstate the importance of having thick skin as a candidate and not making it about you. It's not you. More often than not, they probably never even saw you or heard you because of some reason or another that had nothing to do with you. And so what I see, and I know you've seen it too, Kevin and producer Bev, is, oh my God, they got my resume. They saw that I went to Chico State. So they probably think all I did was smoke weed and drink beer, and now they're never going to get back to me. And the truth is, maybe I sent it to the wrong email address, or it just got lost in the ATS, or who knows what happened to it. But again, so I'm going to ask you a trick question. There's so much, to your earlier comment, Kevin, there's so much attention and dedication to having a system, which there needs to be a system to which that everybody, compliance and everyone's singing from the same hymnal. So I submit and I'm processed. I go through the process in an orderly, scheduled kind of, what's the structured interviewing kind of, so it's a structure. So you have to measure, to your point, candidate attribution, who's coming from where, why, where are all the good ones. What are your thoughts around, I just bypass that whole thing and I just go, you know what? I heard Kevin Francis on a podcast, and I know Kevin Francis is the head of TA. at company XYZ. And we are going to ask how people can get in touch with you at the end. So be ready for that. And I bypass the system. Or maybe I know the hiring manager, or maybe because I'm a big, my school of thought, and I think I've lost a few subscribers this way, is the best job to apply for is the one that doesn't exist because there's no competition. If I just start, if I find out that, and I think you made an earlier comment, which is super important, have your story straight, have a goal, have whatever it is, know what you want, so that, because you're not a career counselor, you're a TA leader. So you're gonna, if I don't know what I want, how are you supposed to know? So this is your point about asking questions, so you can kind of adjust the lens or the filter and position yourself in a favorable way, is very insightful. But what are your thoughts about me bypassing the system and going right to the hiring manager or the recruiter or someone outside and saying, hey, I love money and I love people, and I think I'd be a real asset for your company. Can we get together? Does that work? Does that dog hunt in Kevin Francis's world, or is that a mistake?
I don't think it's a mistake. If somebody can get an audience going directly to a manager or leader in an organization, knowing that there's no published, right? No published opportunity, and get the audience, I think it's great. I think the challenges today are to get that, to have that conversation, because everyone's pulled in a number of different directions. What I would advocate for is for that individual to say, okay, I know who that leader is. Who do I know? Who can I get to who can broker me an intro? If you can get a warm introduction, you'll get the audience. You'll get the conversation. I have seen that work over and over again, because what a lot of folks don't realize is that when you're in the role, you're being inundated with requests, and they're not trying to be disrespectful. It's a time management issue. It's about, what are my priorities? I've got my CEO, I've got my manager pounding on me doing this. I've got my team that needs this, or that. I've got to prioritize that over an email I received, or maybe a voicemail I received, a text I received saying, hey, can we have an informational conversation? Those are the things. So that's why, if you can get that warm intro, your success is going to go up 4 or 5x. It's always good to do that. And I think that, and there's a way you can kind of determine whether or not you're going to be applicable. Your skill set is something that's going to be needed in that organization too. Understanding their business, looking at what the roles they're trying to fill, and saying, you know what, I could add value in this way, so you can position yourself in that manner when you're having the conversation, when you're reaching out to that individual.
There's a lot to unpack there. I think that's really, really powerful, Kevin, is just what you said, knowing about the company, I forget which episode it was, but someone said, producer Bev, you may remember, it was like just having your story straight. Whatever your story is, it's a story, and it's a good story. And there is someone looking for you, and someone that wants and needs you. And I like the way you express that, because which is, I think, another good question to ask you, Kevin. I'm never not amazed in my experience at what, and let's just for the purposes of this podcast agree that I think there's a lot of parallels in sales and recruiting. All right. And you've done a really good job of highlighting the importance of, your customers. Your customers are the hiring managers. Your customers are the candidates in some respect. So we're always selling in some. Okay, I've just got the note from producer Bev where we've only got another hour. I better tighten it up. Don't laugh too much. It takes away from the sadness. Okay. So no, we're wrapping. We're gonna have the hard stop here. So we'll always leave them hungry. But so Kevin, we've talked a lot about what to do or what you should do, and having the story, and I was just going to touch on the fact that you'd be shocked, and maybe you could speak to this better than I can, but whenever I was interviewing somebody so I've done some interviewing, it would be the littlest things. Oh, you coached Little League? I love Little League. Or, you're a veteran. I love Marines. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. I got that from you, Kevin Francis. So it's these little things that catch people's attention. A guy on a podcast a couple of days ago said he would send a FedEx, because everybody opens FedExes. And in his FedEx, he'd glue a action figure on a fence and say, could you get off the fence or whatever, but just being creative and being thought. Here's the big takeaway that I would love for someone to answer. I guess I'm going to answer it, is just to be, you have to stand out. And there's a fine line between stalking and standing out. But back to your earlier comment, how can I make it easier for you to see me and hear me and understand? And the ways you described are: know what you want, understand the company, be referred in, know somebody there, be persistent. I mean, all these are really, it sounds cliche, but those are all little building blocks, actionable building blocks that can, and at some level, let's face it, it is a numbers game. You do have to have, and that's what I encourage people to do, is the bigger the net, the more fish you're going to catch. It's just that point. Okay. So, we talked a lot about what you should do, anything we shouldn't do, anything that and it doesn't have to be super granular. It could be before the interview or in the process, but what are things you discourage people from doing?
I mean, there's common sense, right, that needs to be applied, right? One of the things that I think has people are not as diligent about today is following up with the folks you interview with, the folks you speak with, showing gratitude, right, for the time, for the opportunity, right? Because that, I think, it always leaves a positive impression on the individual when you do that, right? When someone says thank you, immediately there's a feeling that consumes us, right? Versus somebody who came in and total disregard for it, didn't follow up, didn't do some of those little things. And believe it or not, those things can be valuable, because sometimes if the person's followed up, what we'll do, if there's even the slightest question on something, we'll fire back. Say, hey, by the way, we'll ask a clarifying question, right? If someone didn't follow up, I don't know if they're really that interested. That can be the takeaway, whether or not they are or not. So one thing I would say as a practice, always follow up with a simple note to the person that you spent time with, whether that's somebody that's referring you in the organization, right? Regardless, whether it's the interview, the coordinator, the recruiter, always show your appreciation. And that will go a long way towards your showing the kind of person you are in the process.
Wow, good practical advice. I will pile on because you've kind of, when I talk to people like you, it's infectious, Kevin. It makes me want you. And I'm just sitting here going, it's like you're hypnotizing me, in a very positive way. It's infectious. Like I hear you do it, and it's like, well, then I want to do that too. I want to be respectful. And I think we all talk a good game, including yours truly. But it's the little things, right? We think it's this big giant, no, it's these little itty bitty habits. Common courtesy, common blocking and tackling goes a long way. And I can't reinforce that enough. I would also just pile on and say, if you're a candidate and you're struggling, it's like Kevin said, people want to help. They really do. And if you ask for help or guidance or feedback or input, and I had someone that's, I'm sure maybe you said it, like, in producer Fab, you'll tell me who said it, but getting a job sometimes is a job, right? It can be a full-time job, and it's not necessarily a fun job. So if you can kind of have fun with it and maybe get some people to support you in it and stay busy and active, as you've done a really good job as I look over the trajectory of our friendship and relationship, a willingness to stay busy with whatever you're doing and passionate about it, to give, because sooner or later, energetically, it's going to come back, and you just never know when. All right, so we are almost out of time. We're at that really fun part of the show where we ask for some sort of I look at producer Bev smiling. Okay, I won't use the possum one, but it is fun because HR is a very interesting, everything stops with you. You got to clean up all the messes and pick up all the puzzle pieces and put Humpty Dumpty back together again and fix everything and solve everything. And, and let's be honest, there's a lot of weird stuff happens at companies. So not looking for anything inappropriate or salacious, but do you have a kind of an interesting story, and please, you can be anonymous, about an interviewing experience or a candidate experience? It can be something that happened to you, that to kind of humanize things, and that to give people insight into how interesting HR can really be. And just to give you a frame of reference, we've had bathroom stuff. We've had someone brought his mom in with him for the interview. I can only imagine some of yours, but anything kind of
Sure.
risque?
I'll speak to one that was with a candidate and one that was me as
Okay, two, even better. A
interviewee as a candidate.
Okay.
So the most interesting interview I have ever had happened probably 4 or 5 years ago. Got through the introduction, and one of the first questions I was asked was, tell me how you fire somebody. And I thought, well, this is kind of bizarre. Why would somebody want to know how I fire somebody? So I answered the question, and then we got into, okay, how do you go through disciplinary action, the escalation process? And it was just, and this went on for about 25, 30 minutes. I finally just recused myself and said, this is not for me. If the message to me was, oh, you want me to come in and fire people? Because why else did somebody ask? Right?
That's kind of
I think
weird.
that was the most bizarre interview when I was a candidate. The other interesting thing we had is we had an internship program, and I'm sure some of you have had this. And when we set up the interview, the intern's parents showed up for the interview without their son.
Well, what happened? Did you hire them?
So
did you hire the parents?
No. So we asked the recruiter came up to me and said, hey, Kevin, in the lobby, the intern's father is here. I said, really? Where's the intern? No, it's just him. And so we went down there, and I said, sir, can I help you? And he says, yeah, I'm here for that internship. I said, but it's for your son, right? He says, yeah, but I want to do the interviewing because he's not very good at speaking.
So how did you handle it?
So we just said, sir, we appreciate that, but unfortunately, we have to have the individual who we are considering for the opportunity here to talk to the recruiter so we can properly qualify them against the role itself.
Did you hire him?
No, it never went any further.
Oh wow! Well, let's leave it there. That's a good one. That might make the clickbait reel there, Kevin. Okay, well, so Kevin, obviously you're a font of information. I'm so grateful for you taking the time to do this. How can people get in touch with you if they want to follow up with you offline?
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn. KFrancis4 is one way. You can reach me on my email at kfrancis4@gmail. That is another way to reach me, and you'll reach me through one of those channels, and that's the best way to get a hold of me.
And I just, audience, listeners, viewers, nothing but good has come from my association with Kevin Francis, as you can well see. And this has been and I think we may have to have you back and do a deeper dive on the whole Marine Corps police thing. As you know, I have a fascination with law enforcement and your military background. I know, well, you're an all shucks guy, and that's great because I'm not, clearly, as the audience well knows. So Kevin, thank you very much. And producer Bab, did you want to dip in your oar anywhere?
No, thank you. I always enjoy talking with Kevin, though.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kevin. And until next time, like and subscribe, feedback, comments. Thanks, everybody. Make it a powerful day or night or wherever you are.
Thanks for watching this episode of Career Keynotes. For more killer content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We welcome all comments and questions and are grateful for any input regarding future content, topics, and guests. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.